Hi everyone! Last video I talked about max HP and how it could be balanced to give new life and variety to some classes. Well, today I want to continue discussing class balance. I was hoping to talk about max mana. Characters only have two options, but I still need to figure out what I would do better. With that said, I do want to start talking about individual class rebalancing until I can form a strong enough opinion on mana. So for today's video, I'm hoping to talk about a class that's very near and dear to me. Today, I want to talk about rebalancing the Assassin. Does the Assassin need to be changed? If so, why? Well, that's what I want to discuss in this video. Hopefully there are players who agree with me, but if you don't, I understand. At the very least, I think it is important to start talking about what people want from a class. We might at least get something useful out of the concept. Now, before throwing out any ideas, I do want to ask three very important questions about the Assassin. First, what is the Assassin's role? Why would someone play it in the first place? Second, is that role unique? Are there any characters that already fill this role? Could someone maybe use a similar character instead? Third, does the Assassin do its role well? Does it work well for beginners? What about veterans? What about everyone in between? I think these 3 points are important to consider, so we don't just go around adding or subtracting from the class with no clear goal in mind. So, on to the Assassin's role, and I'll try to keep things broad. First, I think the Assassin's role is a DPS character. It augments its single target DPS with an extra DPS from an area of effect damage over time. It also happens to have very high speed. Now, to the second question, is the Assassin unique? Well, in my opinion, it's not entirely unique. See, the Ninja is also a high DPS class that shares a high speed, but it does have the cost of some range and no AoE damage over time. What's more, the Trickster is also a very similar class, although instead of from its poison, it gets its DPS from its higher stats. Finally, does the Assassin do its role well? And here's where I think the Assassin really falls short. See, the Assassin starts out as a respectable option for new players. Poison is a great way for beginners to clear out the lowlands. Even into early and mid-game content, the Assassin is still effective at clearing out Godlands, and especially at hitting soulbound on bosses. Briefly, I do want to pause and just bring up how reliable this character used to be against bosses back before the pet overhaul. I do think it's kind of sad to see that this aspect was lost to power creep, but I'm digressing a little bit. Sadly, I think those early roles are where the Assassin peaked. Going into late and endgame content, the Assassin tends to be outshined by the other classes. By late game, the Assassin's damage pales in comparison to other characters, especially when in a large group. What's more, the extra DPS from poison is its unique gimmick, even if that is adding more DPS to other characters. Heck, the poison usually isn't even strong enough, nor does it last long enough to be noticeable during most late game content. Sadly, the dagger also tends to be overshadowed, and that's honestly just by the Trickster alone, without even thinking about the other classes. So, in my opinion, would I change the Assassin and how? Well, obviously, yes, I would. However, I think it's important to note that I only want to alter it in a way that would mostly affect its late and end game content. I think it still works just fine as a beginner to middle game class. Obviously, first way we could change it is to give it a Wiz Mod. A lot of players have been asking this for a while now. There are plenty of ways Wiz Mod could affect poisons too. It could increase the impact damage, the damage over time, the radius. Heck, maybe it even adds extra damage ticks to the duration somehow. Really, I think most players would be happy with any sort of combination that we could give for Wiz Mod, just as long as it has something. I think another important part of Wiz Mod is that it also gives a little bit of variety to equipment. It'd be nice to see assassins running around with wisdom boosting equipment. Part of what I want to do is make characters more fun to play in general, not just make them more balanced. Another way I'd also like to balance the Assassin is by changing around some of its stats. See, the Assassin used to be a class that could rush in a pinch. However, with pets, the game has leaned heavily into relying on Rogue, Mystic, and especially Trickster for rushing. Now for the late game content the Assassin is struggling with, even ninjas, warriors, priests, and paladins seem to have a leg up on this poor guy. With that said, I say we move 10 points out of its speed and we put it somewhere more useful. That's right, I say we move 10 speed into its attack stat. In my mind, this changes the assassin from an unnecessarily fast character with mediocre DPS to a good DPS character with high speed. I mean, 65 speed is still faster than everything except for the rogue and trickster if you don't have a speedy boost. Now, for those of you wondering, I put all this down onto a DPS calculator from pfiffle. Now here's the old graph showing the difference between assassin, tricksters, and ninja. As you can see, assassin's at the very bottom. Now with 10 points out of its speed and into its attack, this is what its damage would look like. Its damage would actually be higher than the trickster, but it would still be considerably lower than the ninja. Now, immediately I want to address a criticism I could see with this. But potato, assassin does have more DPS than the trickster if you include the poison. And to that, I agree. However, the difference in DPS does not make up for one major factor. The other two have useful abilities. See, both have abilities that increase their movement drastically, and the trickster can even pull off unique tricks that nobody else can. I mean, I really can't justify that small bit of extra DPS if it means losing out on such a useful ability. What's more, the current poison DPS is even smaller when compared to the DPS of a buffed group. Keep in mind, a lot of late game scenarios involve buffed groups, and that's exactly where the assassin already struggles to make a name for itself. And furthermore, with endgame content, strong sets like these make poisons even less important. Those sets weren't even with the best DPS gear, and they still make poison look weak. At the end of the day, the assassin just shouldn't have less DPS than a more supportive class like the trickster. Alright, well this video has been going on for a while, but I still have another suggestion that could be considered, and that's items. See, one of the best additions to the assassin's endgame arsenal is the Crystal Serpent Poison, also known as the Pogmer. This single item breathed new life into the assassin. Suddenly, its underwhelming DPS didn't matter because it had a powerful, albeit difficult to use, support option. And I can think of one new type of poison that would make the assassin more interesting for late game content, without breaking any of the early game content. I think having consistent damage over time would be very helpful on a number of bosses. See, a lot of poisons were redesigned with fast damage in mind to help with situations like Godlands where enemies can be steamrolled. I think an interesting alternative would be to add an untiered poison designed to deal massive damage, but over the course of a long time. This would make poison much more powerful in boss fights, where bosses tend to last a lot longer anyways. Perhaps Deca could add a poison that deals a strong, say, 2000 damage over 12 seconds with a 3.5 tile radius at the cost of 120 mana. I don't know. These are all just rough suggestions to kind of encourage discussion. It's more the general idea of this, rather than the actual numbers. Well, that's all the ideas I had. Quickly though, I do want to think about how these changes may affect some of the other classes. First, would buffing the assassin this way hurt the trickster and ninja? I think the trickster would be absolutely fine without being the best DPS dagger class. Prism is still an incredible ability. It would still be needed for rushing, full skipping, and decoying enemies away from the group. Nothing that you can do to the assassin is going to change that. The ninja might not like the competition as much though. Still, the ninja would continue to be higher DPS, and it has instant speedy and shots that pierce. It may lose some attention, but I don't think it would lose too much. Anyways, that's all for today. Thank you for hearing me out, and I hope you leave your thoughts below. I'll try to respond if I can. If you do want to let other players check out this video, maybe leave it a like so it can pick up attention. Anyways, that's all I have though, so thank you. Bye.